Let's get to the first guy here, Frankie. Stefon Diggs. Woo! Okay, this one's interesting. Let's spend a little time on this first guy here. All right, Stefon Diggs, he was a major force in Buffalo, paired up with Josh Allen. Now he got traded to the Houston Texans. Very, very interesting with CJ Stroud and a handful of other weapons here. All right, last year he finished as a wide receiver 10, so pretty decent year for Stefon Diggs. Currently, he's the 18th receiver off the board, going around round 3 or so, early round 3. All right, Frank, break it down. What's going on with Stefon Diggs?
John, Stefon, this is really, really fascinating because nobody kind of seen this coming. I mean, especially with how he had that synergy with Josh Allen. I mean, obviously there were some issues a little bit here and there, some, big polarizing personalities with that of Diggs and a few others on Buffalo. And sometimes, yeah, they would, knock heads a little bit here and there, but nobody saw a trade like this happening. And before we dive in, John, it was kind of interesting for those that were listening to Josh Allen's most recent, interview after one of the days at camps that he had, and was asked if he missed that of Stefon Diggs. And boy, oh boy, if you did not hear his response, you probably should, because verbatim, his words and not mine, he's not sure if missing Stefon Diggs was actually the right way to phrase it. AKA, hell no, he doesn't miss him at camp with that crazy ass personality and the big, bold personality that he has. Definitely probably misses his talent. Not going to doubt that. But no, so it's very, very interesting, man. I don't know
what that reminds me of, man?
What's that?
You know what that reminds me of? The movie Office Space. When they're sitting in the table with the Bobs, yes. And he goes, well, seems like you've been missing quite a bit of work lately. And he goes, I wouldn't say I've been missing it, Bob.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that's the answer right there. I wouldn't say we're missing Stefon Diggs.
And I don't think they really are just yet. They might mid-season, John, but very interesting. I digress. Stefon Diggs is no longer a Buffalo Bill. He is now a Texan. John, he was able to sign a little bit of a extension here, 1 year, $2.2 million, which is nice. But what's fascinating is he's going from one superstar quarterback to arguably an up-and-coming superstar with that of CJ Stroud, Buckeyes season. Now, he's going to be playing alongside of that of Nico Collins, who had a career year last year. Tank Dell really showed out, especially that rookie being a rookie last year, who would have been insane had he not got hurt at the end of the year. Then obviously, we have also talked about, John, Joe Mixon being a new face in a new place, heading over to that of the Texans as well. So what I'm getting at is this entire Houston offense has pretty much been revamped in a sense in terms of where Nico Collins is now going to play, is going to shift a bit differently. Tank Dell is going to be healthy. Now we're going to have to see how that pans out with Stefon Diggs. Obviously, they re-signed Dalton Schultz, and I just mentioned Joe Mixon. So for me, man, I'm so excited to see what this offense can do. But with that being said, what about the stats? So what Stefon Diggs did last year, John, he had 160 targets. Let's just pause. 160 targets. He ain't going to be seeing that this year. No way. But he had 107 receptions, 1,183 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns. Johnny finished as receiver 10, as you mentioned. So really had a damn good year. Now looking into the Houston, it's going to be interesting to see if he can replicate this. I don't think it will be to that level of caliber. I think he'll still potentially be a top 20, top 15-ish type of receiver. But it will be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, it will be. And you mentioned the 160 targets, which is insane. I was just looking at Nico Collins just to get a little kind of feel for that. Nico Collins had 109 targets last year total. So that's where, we get into the fantasy implications here. And the question's going to be, is there going to be enough targets? Are there going to be enough targets to go around in this offense? And who is it going to get distributed to? So we're looking at fantasy implications of this. You're looking at Stefon Diggs in the 3rd round. How do you go about your strategy if you're looking at Stefon Diggs? Is this a guy you want?
John, that's a good question. Is this a guy that I want? The answer is yes, while also no. And what I mean by this is yes, he has a lot of name value. So if you're drafting him, you can use that piece as a trade piece. You can use him as that name value to sweeten the pot for some sort of deal, whatever it may be. I also like him because if I can also get him as my receiver 2, maybe my receiver 3, if I go 3 receivers in a row, which I've been known to do, especially in a 3-receiver league, right? That's also super interesting. I'm all over that. If he's your receiver 1, that is where we've been used to seeing Diggs for the last few years. That's where it's a hell no. I think with how well Nico Collins played last year, how incredible Tank Dell was, and then them re-signing Dalton Schultz to a longer-term contract, I just think, to your point, man, there's too many mouths to feed for him to even remotely produce what he did last year in terms of a target share perspective.
It's really difficult and it's confusing. And, I think it's going to have to be something we're just going to have to watch throughout camp. We're going to have to watch in the preseason, assuming Stefon Diggs, you see anything out of him, really.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume you would, because it's CJ Stroud with a young quarterback. It's a revamped offense. I would assume you're going to see some work and we're going to be able to see him out there. But Nico Collins is being drafted ahead of him.
What do you think about that? Yeah, I was going to say,
I think it's nuts. There's no chance I'm touching Nico Collins in the second round, early third. It's not happening. I'm not going to anchor my team on Nico Collins, who, shout out to us last year, told every single person, pick up Nico Collins as your last pick. We did. Other people did. And now he's being drafted second, early third round. Just saying, guys. Just saying. Scoreboard, motherfuckers.
John, what's interesting too is Stefon Diggs is ADOT. And for those of you guys don't know what ADOT is, that's average depth of target, was 7.4 yards. And what's interesting is that we're going to be talking about a few other guys that are a little bit lower on this list in terms of ADP that actually had a higher ADOT. So it's kind of, Stefon Diggs had a really strange year last year. And yes, it was good. It wasn't dominant. The first few weeks were dominant. I mean, we go back to understanding, the change from Ken Dorsey to then Joe Brady from an offensive coordinator perspective. That totally was, I think, was the last straw, right? The straw that broke the camel's back in terms of being able to get Diggs the ball. So it's going to be interesting, man. But yeah, I'm excited though to see him in Houston.
I am too. I'm excited to see how it kind of shakes out. But I mean, we have to really temper our expectations with Stefon Diggs.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what's much more realistic for Stefon Diggs is somewhere around 80 catches and 1,000 yards. I think that's really kind of the ceiling of what we're going to be looking at with Stefon Diggs. So if that's the case, which I believe it will be, if I take him as my wide receiver 2, I am certainly in the next couple of rounds going to go a little heavier with wide receiver. Yeah, because it's a huge risk. We know he's not Amari Cooper. He's not, he's not that locker room guy. He's a bit of a prima donna. He's a bit of a pain in the ass, to be perfectly honest.
Yep.
And he could throw a temper tantrum and not get targeted for 2 games, which would destroy you if you're drafting him that high. I like him much better in my flex because I'd like to have some options. But I have to be perfectly honest with you, man. Stefon Diggs is a guy I almost every time skip over in the draft.
Interesting.
And I look at other guys that are around him. I think it's just too volatile. I think he helps the team greatly. But when it comes to fantasy, he's no longer the alpha. He's no longer the target monster who demands and commands targets. So I think it'll be really interesting on how we play that.